Before the first rays of the Andean sun crest the jagged horizon, the noble household of Cuzco stirs with a quiet anticipation that has been rehearsed for centuries. Darkness still clings to the terraced mountainsides, within the compound of stone walls and finely thatched roofs. Life is already beginning to unfold in patterns that mirror the order of the empire itself. The noblewoman whose lineage ties her to the ruling elite of Tawantinsuyu awakens not with the crude jolt of necessity, but with the measured grace that accompanies her status. For her routine is not merely a matter of personal habit, but an embodiment of cosmic and social order. Her rising reflects the rhythms of sun and earth, of power and obligation. And each act of the morning carries meaning both intimate and imperial. The chamber where she rests is warmer than the brisk mountain air outside, owing to thick walls of carefully cut stone that fit so precisely no mortar is needed. The room is sparse by later European standards, yet rich in the language of Inca nobility. Woven mantles of the finest Kumbi cloth folded near her sleeping space. Small containers of maize beer and dried coca leaves, ready for ritual use, and a carefully arranged platform that elevates her above the floor. Her garments are not left scattered, but are attended to by servants themselves, bound by duty and honor to care for someone of her station. The textile patterns hold political weight as much as they do aesthetic beauty. The takapu, designs serving as markers of identity and lineage, encoding the power of her family in threads dyed with natural pigments and woven with exceptional skill. Before she even rises fully, the noblewoman partakes in a quiet moment of reflection, one that scholars interpret as part of the broader Andean philosophy that infused every action with purpose. The Incas did not conceive of time as a simple linear progression, but as a cyclical unfolding, where the morning is both a return and a renewal. For her to awaken is to participate in the eternal cycles of Inti, the sun god, whose warmth sustains the empire. She does not simply wake because she is rested. She wakes because the empire itself is awakening, and her body and actions are microcosms of the state. Attendants arrive softly, careful not to disturb the dignity of the moment. Their steps are deliberate, carrying woven baskets that contain items necessary for the first rituals of the day. There is coca, not merely as a stimulant, but as a sacred plant imbued with the essence of Pachamama, the Earth Mother. Leaves will be selected and chewed in a ritual manner, not for casual indulgence, but as offerings to bridge the human and divine. There is chita maize beer brewed by specialized women called akla, whose role in society was both spiritual and practical, weaving the empire together through food, cloth, and ritual preparation. The noblewoman accepts the coca leaves, holding them for a brief moment before placing them gently to her lips. Analysis of Inca ritual practice shows us that this act was layered with meaning. Coca chewing was common across classes, but for the nobility it held a ceremonial weight, a sign of communion with gods and ancestors. The bitterness of the leaf, softened with alkaline additives, releases alkaloids that dull hunger and ease the body into wakefulness. But what matters most is the gesture, the connection to forces greater than herself. The first act of her morning is not personal comfort, but cosmic alignment. Once this quiet offering is made, attendants assist her in dressing. Here again the difference between nobility and commoner is stark. While the majority of the empire's subjects clothed themselves in coarser garments of llama or alpaca wool, she is adorned in garments of vicuna fiber, a luxury material reserved exclusively for the Inca and the highest elites. The softness of vicuna is legendary, even to modern sensibilities, and in the Inca world, its scarcity and sanctity made it the fabric of power. Naku, the long garment draped around her body, is pinned with tupu fasteners of silver, their gleam catching the faint light creeping in from the east. Each piece she wears is more than adornment. It is a symbol of her rank, her connection to the imperial center, and her role within a hierarchy that extended from the Sapa Inca himself down to the farmers tending terraces on the farthest fringes of the empire. The act of dressing is accompanied by subtle rituals. Servants may sprinkle the air with fragrant herbs, the scent of mal or other native plants believed to carry protective qualities. They may whisper quiet prayers. Not because the noblewoman demands it, but because her body is considered a vessel of authority, her well-being directly tied to the prosperity of those under her care. Scholars examining Inca society often emphasize how the personal was inseparable from the political, and in this moment we see that entanglement embodied. Her hair, long and dark, is brushed carefully, strands arranged with precision, for hair itself was symbolic of vitality and identity. To groom it was to honor both the individual and the lineage she carried. As the sky begins to shift from indigo to the soft glow of dawn, preparations for food commence. Her meal is not the simple fare of maize cakes or boiled potatoes that sustain common laborers, but a curated selection of the empire's bounty. Quinoa, maize, and beans, staples of the Andean diet, are prepared with a refinement befitting her position. Dishes may include chuno, the freeze-dried potatoes made possible by the high-altitude climate, reconstituted and flavored with herbs. There is fresh maize, roasted and offered alongside. The noble household has access to delicacies gathered from across Tawantinsuyu, dried fish from the coast, peppers from lower valleys, perhaps even fruits carried by relay runners along the vast road network. In the preparation and presentation of food, we glimpse the vast logistics of the empire itself, where goods flowed in tribute to the capital, demonstrating both the wealth of the state and its capacity to integrate diverse ecologies into a single political whole. Yet even here, the morning meal is not a casual indulgence, but a moment of structured significance. Before she eats, a portion is set aside as an offering. The Incas viewed reciprocity as the fundamental principle of life, and food was never consumed without recognition of the forces that provided it. A small libation of chicha may be poured to the earth, the liquid seeping into soil as a symbolic act of nourishment returned to Pachamama. Portions may be placed aside for ancestors, whose continued presence shapes the lives of the living. To eat is not only to sustain the body, but to reaffirm one's place in a network of obligations, stretching from gods to kin, from mountains to fields. The noblewoman eats deliberately, aware that every action of her day will be observed and, in a sense, recorded by those around her. Nobility is not privacy, but performance, and each choice becomes an example to others. The analysis of Inca culture reveals that social hierarchy was not maintained solely by force, but by the constant reiteration of roles through ritualized behavior. Her morning meal, therefore, is an affirmation of structure, a reminder to her household of the values of gratitude, order, and reverence. Once nourished, she begins the next phase of her morning, which is deeply intertwined with the spiritual life of the empire. A priest or attendant versed in ritual practice may enter to conduct a brief ceremony, lining the household with celestial rhythms. This is especially significant during times of solstice or equinox, when the position of the sun demanded more elaborate rites. But even on an ordinary day, the cycle of worship continues. Offerings of coca, chicha, or small textiles are made to huacas, the sacred places and objects that permeate Andean cosmology. The noblewoman participates actively, for her role is not merely domestic, but political-spiritual, a bridge between her lineage and the divine. This daily ritual practice reinforces the principle that nobility in the Inca world was never idle. Each gesture, from chewing coca to arranging garments to pouring libations, reinforces a worldview where personal life is inseparable from statecraft and cosmology. By reenacting these patterns every morning, the noblewoman becomes both participant and symbol, her body inscribed with the empire's ideals. As the sun finally breaks over the mountains, its light streaming into the courtyard, the noblewoman steps outside, flanked by attendants. The city of Cuzco awakens alongside her, a place not merely of stone buildings, but of carefully designed symbolism. Streets radiate outward like the empire's sec lines, sacred pathways that mapped the cosmos onto geography. From her vantage point, she can see rooftops catching the light, hear the stirrings of commoners beginning their labor, sense the pulse of an empire that stretches from highland valleys to distant deserts and forests. Her presence outside is itself an act of alignment with Inti, the sun god, whose power legitimizes her lineage and the authority of the ruling elite. The morning has not yet advanced far, yet within these opening hours her life has already illustrated the complexity of Inca society. Waking is not a private matter, but a reenactment of cosmic cycles. Dressing is not merely practical, but symbolic of political hierarchy. Eating is not consumption, but reciprocity. Each act reveals layers of meaning that bind together individual, household, state, and cosmos. The noblewoman's routine is not trivial, not an isolated anecdote, but a lens through which the vast and intricate world of Tawantinsuyu can be understood. And as she turns to the tasks that will follow, whether overseeing the organization of her household, preparing for ceremonies, or engaging with visiting relatives and allies, we see how the morning has laid the foundation for a day that embodies the empire itself, ordered, ritualized, and deeply interwoven with the fabric of nature and divinity. As the golden rays of Inti stretch across the valleys and climb the ridges that encircle Cuzco, the noblewoman's morning unfolds beyond the intimate chambers of sleep and ritual. The first hours after sunrise are marked not by idleness but by the careful ordering of household life, an ordering that reflects the structure of the empire itself. To understand her morning is to glimpse the rhythms of governance, for even in her home, the principles of Inca administration take shape in miniature. Her residence is more than a private dwelling. It is a hub of political, economic, and ritual activity where decisions reverberate outward into the community and reinforce the bonds of hierarchy that tie each household to the state. Attendants gather in a courtyard paved with flat stones, their figures forming a living tableau of rank and responsibility. The women of her household, some relatives and others retainers, move with fluid coordination as they prepare materials for the day, baskets of maize set aside for redistribution, textiles stacked and inventoried, vessels of chicha arranged for later gatherings. Each task is performed not only with efficiency, but with ceremony, for in Inca society, labor was never devoid of meaning. Work was a form of devotion, a reenactment of the principle of Ani, reciprocal obligation that bound individuals to one another and to the state. In this environment, the noblewoman's role is not to labor with her hands, but to oversee, to direct, to embody the order that ensures the household mirrors the cosmos. Her voice carries weight not through volume, but through the authority it represents. When she gestures toward the stores of grain, she does so with the knowledge that these goods are not personal wealth in the sense later Europeans would understand, but resources entrusted to her care by a system of tribute that sustained the entire empire. Warehouses, or kalkas, dot the highlands filled with maize, quinoa, dried potatoes, and textiles, meticulously stored and accounted for by quipukumeoks, the record keepers who knotted information into cords of dyed fibers. The goods brought to her household flow through a larger network, a system of redistribution that ensured the Inca elite could host feasts, conduct rituals, and reward loyalty. When she inspects these stores, she is not counting possessions, but safeguarding the visible signs of power and reciprocity that knit the empire together. Servants step forward with quipus cords of vibrant color, each knot encoding data about production, tribute, and obligations. While noblewomen were not themselves quipukumeos, their proximity to power meant they were familiar with the significance of these tools. To glance at the cords was to understand the flow of maize from distant valleys, the number of textiles woven by subordinate households, the tribute of llamas brought in from pastoral regions. Even without personally reading every knot, she embodies the authority that these records uphold. Modern scholars debate the precise mechanisms of quipu literacy, but what remains clear is that the cords were more than accounting devices. They were instruments of statecraft, as essential to governance as the very roads that stretched across the empire. As she moves through the courtyard, attendants present her with textiles, unfurled to reveal intricate patterns of tekepu, those geometric motifs that spoke a language of power. Each square, each repetition of color and line conveyed identity, lineage, and even political allegiance. She touches the fabric lightly, her fingers tracing patterns that might denote her family's heritage, her marriage alliances, or her region of origin. In this tactile moment lies an entire political world. For textiles were among the most valued commodities in Inca society. To wear them was to signal status. To distribute them was to cement loyalty. To withhold them was to enforce obedience. Her household's ability to produce and command such textiles testifies to her position within the hierarchy of Cuzco. After these inspections, she turns her attention to the people who depend on her patronage. Younger women in the household approach, some of them relatives sent to live under her care, others wards entrusted to her by political allies. Their education falls partly under her responsibility. In the Inca world, noblewomen were custodians, not only of domestic life, but of the future generation's refinement. She instructs them in the weaving of cloth. It's not by laboring at the loom herself, but by correcting their patterns, emphasizing the importance of symmetry, color harmony, and adherence to tradition. Every woven piece is more than practice. It is a lesson in discipline, patience, and cultural continuity. In these moments, she shapes not only the skills, but the identities of those who will one day uphold the empire's order. The hum of daily activity is accompanied by the distant sounds of Cuzco itself. Couriers hurry through the streets, carrying messages along the empire's sec lines and road networks. The smell of maize being cooked drifts from common households, mingling with the sharper scent of burning wood. Priests at nearby temples prepare offerings to the wakas that dot the landscape, aligning their rituals with the celestial calendar. Against this backdrop, her household stands as a reflection of broader society, ordered, industrious, suffused with ritual significance. As the morning progresses, preparations for visitors take shape. For a noblewoman of her stature, social obligations are as central to the morning routine as personal care or household oversight. Kinship networks and political alliances define her existence, and the act of receiving guests is both a familial duty and a political performance. Attendants lay out finely woven mats in the reception space, ensuring that the seating arrangement reflects hierarchy. For status must be visibly reinforced at every encounter. Vessels of chicha are placed strategically to be shared in libations that bind host and guest in bonds of reciprocity. When her visitors arrive, perhaps relatives from another noble lineage, perhaps messengers representing an alliche, greets them with a composure that reflects her rank. The exchange is formalized, not in written contracts, but in the rituals of hospitality. She may offer textiles or portions of food, gestures that signal generosity and affirm the obligations of Aini. Her guests, in turn, present tokens of respect, perhaps coca leaves of fine quality or reports of labor and tribute rendered. In this delicate choreography of giving and receiving, the noblewoman plays a crucial role in maintaining the cohesion of her social world. Analysis of these gatherings reveals how Inca politics were woven into daily life. Unlike later European courts, where diplomacy often unfolded in distant halls, here it is embedded in the routines of the household. The noblewoman's morning is political theater, enacted not with pomp, but with ritualized generosity and the constant reaffirmation of bonds. Every visitor leaves, not merely with sustenance, but with a reminder of obligation, recognition that their fortunes are tied to her lineage and, by extension, to the imperial structure of Tawantinsuyu. When the conversations conclude and the visitors depart, the noblewoman returns to quieter forms of engagement. She may sit with attendants who recount news from across the valleys, information carried by runners who traverse the empire's vast road network. She listens not passively, but with the awareness that knowledge is power. Reports of a successful harvest in one province, of a festival held in honor of a local waka, of unrest brewing in a distant corner. Each piece of information contributes to her understanding of the empire's health, as though she is not a ruler in the sense of the Sapa Inca. Her role as noblewoman places her within the fabric of governance, where awareness and influence shape the flow of authority. As the sun climbs higher, she directs her attention once more to ritual. The morning hours are not complete without a deliberate act of devotion, often conducted within her household shrine or directed toward the sacred mountains visible from her courtyard. A priest or elder family member may lead the offering, but she participates actively, for her body and voice carry weight. Coca leaves are cast to the wind, chicha poured to the earth, prayers murmured to Inti and Pachamama. These acts are not empty gestures, but reaffirmations of the sacred covenant between humans and the divine. To neglect them would be to risk imbalance, for in the Andean worldview, harmony must be maintained through constant reciprocity. This moment of ritual underscores a profound truth. In the Inca world, there is no separation between sacred and mundane. To oversee grain stores is an act of governance and a sacred trust. To host visitors is a political obligation and a spiritual reaffirmation. To chew coca, to wear textiles, to pour libations, All are threads in the tapestry of cosmic order. The noblewoman's morning, therefore, not a sequence of chores, but a lived philosophy, a reenactment of the principles that sustain the empire. As the final hours of the morning approach, the noblewoman prepares for the transition into midday activities. Already, her day has encompassed private ritual, personal adornment, household oversight, political reception, and spiritual devotion. Yet nothing has been random, nothing casual. Each action has been infused with meaning, reinforcing her role as both individual and symbol. To study her morning is to study Tawantinsuyu itself, for within the walls of her household are mirrored the structures of state, the rhythms of nature, and the cycles of the cosmos. And as she gathers herself to step once more into the open air, where the sun now shines with full brilliance, we understand that her routine is far more than personal habit. It is a performance of empire, a daily reconstitution of the social, political, and spiritual forces that hold the Inca world together. By the time the sun has risen well above the surrounding ridges and its golden light spills fully into the valley, the noblewoman's day enters its most active phase. The household, already humming with activity, now expands its reach outward. For the late morning is a time when private rhythms intersect with the communal life of Cuzco. She does not live enclosed in an isolated domestic sphere. Her presence extends into ritual, craft, and community, each act reinforcing her role as mediator between household, lineage, and the larger imperial world. Stepping beyond the threshold of her residence, the noblewoman is accompanied by a small entourage of attendants. Their presence is not ostentation but necessity. For to walk alone would diminish her status and strip her movements of their performative significance. Each attendant carries with them the tools and offerings required for the tasks ahead: baskets of coca leaves, small ceramic vessels of chicha, folded textiles, and bundles of herbs. In this retinue we glimpse the layered structure of Andean society, where the actions of one noblewoman ripple outward through the labor of many. Her first destination is often a waka, a sacred site woven into the sex system that radiates from Cusco like spokes from the center of the world. To the Inca, the landscape itself was alive with presence, every stone, spring, and mountain peak imbued with vitality and deserving of reverence. As she approaches one such shrine, perhaps a carved rock or a small temple space aligned with the path of the sun, she slows her pace, for the act of arrival itself is part of the ritual. Attendants prepare the offerings with solemn care. Leaves of coca are selected carefully, not any leaf, but those deemed most symmetrical, for symmetry reflects harmony, and harmony reflects order in both cosmos and society. She takes the leaves in her hands, holds them against her lips, and breathes a quiet prayer. The words, though soft, carry immense weight, for to speak is to shape reality. She places the leaves at the shrine, presses her palms against the stone, and pours a libation of chicha, watching as the liquid seeps into earth and rock. To modern eyes, this may appear a simple gesture, yet in the Inca world, it is a reaffirmation of reciprocity. The earth gives maize, potatoes, and life itself. And so the noblewoman returns a portion, binding herself and her household in the web of Ani. Without such acts, the balance between human and divine would be unsettled. After the offering, she lingers, gazing at the mountains that crown the horizon. Each peak has a name, a personality, a presence in the lives of those who dwell in its shadow. Some are considered protective deities, others ancestral beings, all requiring honor. By acknowledging them, she asserts her lineage's rightful place within the sacred geography of Tawantinsuyu. These mountains watch her actions, and through her reverence, she maintains the legitimacy of her status. The ritual is not an optional flourish, but an essential act of governance. For spiritual neglect could weaken her household's prestige, and in the eyes of many, invite misfortune upon her kin. When the ritual concludes, her retinue leads her toward spaces of production, where the wealth of the empire is made tangible. Within her household compound or in adjoining workshops, artisans labor at tasks that sustain both daily life and political economy. The noblewoman's oversight of these crafts is not micromanagement, but a visible assertion of her authority. Women at looms weave textiles of varying grades. From rough cloths destined for everyday use to the delicate, tightly woven kumbi, reserved for nobility and ceremony, the rhythmic clatter of wooden heddles fills the air, a sound as constant in Inca society as the tolling of bells would later be in Europe. She walks among the weavers, pausing to inspect patterns. A misaligned motif or a loose thread is gently corrected, not because she intends to take the shuttle in her own hands, but because her eye sets the standard. The younger women glance up with a mixture of reverence and nervousness, aware that their work is both skill and duty. To weave well is to serve the household, to affirm one's role in the empire's hierarchy. Scholars often remark that in the Inca world, textiles were not just clothing but currency, status markers, and even ritual offerings. In her morning oversight, the noblewoman participates in this economic and symbolic system, ensuring that her household remains both productive and pious. In other space, the preparation of chicha is underway. An activity carried out primarily by women, but central to the political and ritual life of the empire. Large clay vessels, or urpis, stand in rows, filled with fermenting maize. The sweet, yeasty scent drifts into the air. Attendants stir the mixture, monitoring its progress, for chicha must be brewed with care to achieve the proper balance. It is not merely a drink but a social instrument, essential to feasts, rituals, and diplomatic encounters. The noblewoman supervises this process as well, for her household must be prepared to host gatherings at any time. The ability to provide abundant chicha is a visible demonstration of wealth and generosity is power. Nearby, stores of food are examined and organized. Potatoes, both fresh and in their preserved form of chuno, are stacked in neat piles. Quinoa, beans, and dried peppers are sorted and measured. Llamas, tethered in the courtyard, provide wool and meat, their very presence a symbol of wealth. The noblewoman does not count each item herself, but her authority ensures that attendants carry out their tasks with diligence. In this scene, we glimpse the Inca emphasis on redistribution, where noble households acted as nodes in a network of resource flow. Her oversight is not about hoarding, but about readiness, ensuring that when the time comes, she can feed guests, contribute to festivals, or supply laborers, thereby reinforcing her role in the reciprocal economy of the empire. As she completes her circuit of inspection, visitors begin to arrive: craftsmen, relatives, or representatives from allied households, each bearing news, tribute, or requests. The noblewoman receives them in the reception space once again, this time with greater ceremony. Mats are arranged according to status, coca leaves distributed, and chicha poured. The conversations range from the mundane to the significant. A report of weaving completed, a request for assistance with a ritual, an account of laborers sent to a construction project. Through these exchanges, she demonstrates the balance of generosity and authority that defines noble responsibility. Her words are careful, her gestures deliberate. A nod signifies approval. A gift of coca leaves indicates favor. The sharing of chicha confirms bonds. These interactions are not idle chatter, but negotiations of power, carried out within the framework of reciprocity. Inca politics did not rely on contracts or written decrees, but on these embodied acts of exchange. The noblewoman, through her hospitality and discernment, ensures that obligations are remembered and alliances maintained. As the morning wears on, the noblewoman turns her attention towards spiritual instruction within her household. Children, both her own and those of relatives, are gathered in a shaded courtyard. Their education is oral, experiential, rooted in the transmission of tradition, rather than abstract schooling. She speaks to them of lineage, of their ancestors who traced their descent to the founding figures of Cuzco, of the obligations they will bear as they grow. She teaches through example, demonstrating the proper way to handle coca leaves, to pour libations, to show deference to elders. In these lessons we see the Inca emphasis on continuity, where each generation is shaped not only by labor but by ritual knowledge. This instructional moment also underscores the dual nature of her role. She is not only a figure of authority, but a transmitter of culture, a guardian of memory. The children absorb her words and gestures, learning not simply how to behave, but why each act matters. Their future authority will rest on their ability to embody these values, and her responsibility is to ensure they are well prepared. By late morning, the noblewoman has woven together multiple strands of life. Ritual devotion at the waka, Oversight of production, hosting of guests, education of children. Each thread reinforces the others, creating a tapestry that reflects the Inca vision of order. To modern observers, these tasks may seem diverse, but in her world, they are seamless. Spirituality, politics, and economy are not separate domains, but aspects of a single whole. And as the sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard and illuminating the finely dressed figures who move within it, the noblewoman prepares to shift once more into the rhythms of the day. Soon it will be time to participate in broader ceremonies or to receive more formal delegations. But even before midday arrives, her morning has already enacted the central principles of Tawantinsuyu: reciprocity, hierarchy, and cosmic alignment. Each gesture, each decision, each offering has been part of a grander design, one in which her life and the life of the empire are inseparably entwined. As the morning advances toward its zenith, the noblewoman's activities take on a heightened formality. The hours that began with private rituals and household oversight now extend into preparations for the communal and public obligations that define her rank. Her presence is no longer confined to the intimate spaces of chamber and courtyard. It begins to reach outward, touching the lives of others in ways both visible and symbolic. The empire itself in miniature continues to be enacted through her daily movements. The sun climbs higher, its rays pouring over the city of Cuzco and illuminating the stone walls that gleam with a quiet authority. The noblewoman stands in the open air, observing the patterns of shadow and light. The timing of her next acts is not random, but carefully aligned with celestial rhythms. For Inca life was structured around an acute awareness of the sun's passage. The very architecture of Cuzco, with its sightlines and alignments, was designed to mirror the heavens, and her household plays its part in this choreography of cosmic time. Attendants adjust her garments, ensuring that the folds of her anaku and the gleam of her silver tupu pins catch the sunlight just so, a visual testament to her lineage and rank. Within the household compound, preparations for a more formal ritual intensify. This is not the brief libation to Pachamama or the quiet prayer at a waka that marked the early morning. Instead, it is a ceremony of greater weight, one that binds her household not only to the divine, but also to the social fabric of kin and allies. The offerings are prepared with care: woven cloth of fine quality, bowls of maize and beans, dried llama meat, and the ever-present chicha. Attendants grind herbs, mix pigments, and set out small effigies crafted from maize dough, each object carrying symbolic resonance. When the ritual begins, it does so with solemnity. A family elder or designated ritual specialist steps forward, their voice rising in chants that trace a lineage back to ancestors and deities. The noblewoman herself participates not as a passive observer, but as an active vessel of authority. She holds coca leaves to her lips, blows them toward the sky, and casts them into the fire. The smoke curls upward, carrying prayers to the heavens, while chicha poured upon the earth seeps downward, linking the household to Pachamama. Her gestures are deliberate, refined by repetition, for each act must be performed with precision to maintain balance. In this moment, she embodies the dual role of noblewoman, guardian of lineage and mediator with the divine. Her attendants watch closely, absorbing the gravity of the act, for their own lives are bound to her ability to maintain harmony. The ritual is not a private expression of belief, but a public assertion of legitimacy. To perform it well is to demonstrate that her household remains in alignment with cosmic forces, that her authority is sanctioned by the gods themselves. Once the ritual concludes, the atmosphere shifts. What begins with solemn devotion often transitions into measured festivity, for the Inca world recognized the necessity of joy and abundance as part of the sacred cycle. The chicha that was first poured to the earth is now shared among the living. Wooden cups are passed from hand to hand, each sip reinforcing bonds of kinship and reciprocity. The noblewoman raises her vessel, her gesture both gracious and commanding, signaling that generosity flows from her household outward. In this way, ritual transforms into social cohesion, and the empire's principles are once again inscribed in everyday life. Beyond her own household, the noblewoman's responsibilities extend into the broader community. The late morning often calls for appearances at larger gatherings, whether within the neighborhood alu or in spaces associated with the temples of Cuzco. Her departure from the household is itself a moment of spectacle. Attendants gather her garments, adjusting the folds of her cloak, ensuring her headdress sits properly. A procession forms, not extravagant in the sense of later European pageantry, but dignified, ordered, and symbolic. To see her walking through the streets is to be reminded of the presence of hierarchy, the visible embodiment of lineage and status moving among the people. The streets of Cuzco are alive by this time of day. Artisans open their workshops, farmers arrive with goods to trade, priests prepare offerings at nearby shrines, and children dart between households. The city, laid out in the shape of a puma, pulses with activity, its sec lines pointing towards sacred sites across the landscape. The noblewoman's progress through this environment is not casual. It reinforces the sense that the city itself is a ritual space, every street and building aligned with cosmic order. She pauses at intervals to greet acquaintances, offering coca leaves and gestures of respect, receiving in return tokens of acknowledgement. These exchanges, seemingly simple, reaffirm the constant circulation of reciprocity that sustains society. Her destination may be a temple courtyard, where a group of nobles gathers for collective offerings. These gatherings are occasions where kinship and politics converge, and her presence signals her household's participation in the wider networks of power. She joins other women of her rank, their garments a kaleidoscope of woven patterns and colors, their demeanor composed yet expressive of authority. Together they witness or participate in the rites led by priests, offering their own coca and chicha, adding their voices to the prayers that bind the city to its gods. Analysis of these gatherings reveals how the Inca elite maintained cohesion. Unlike later monarchies where formal councils and written decrees structured governance, here authority flowed through ritualized encounters. To be seen, to offer, to share in libations was to exercise power. The noblewoman's role, therefore, is not peripheral but central. She reinforces through her presence the legitimacy of the rituals, lending her lineage's weight to the collective performance. Without such participation, the bonds of kin and empire would fray. When the ceremony concludes, the noblewomen engage in measured conversation. They speak of harvests, of the preparation of festivals, of alliances formed through marriage. Beneath these topics lies the constant awareness of responsibility and obligation. Each word is chosen with care, each gesture of respect calculated to maintain harmony. Here again, the noblewoman's mourning illustrates how politics in the Inca world were inseparable from daily life, woven into the rhythms of ritual and social interaction. Turning to her household, she carries with her not only the residue of incense and the taste of chicha, but also the renewed affirmation of her place within the empire. Attendants remove her outer garments, fold them with care, and prepare fresh food. The morning has been long, filled with acts that blend devotion, governance, and social obligation. Yet there is no sense of separation between these domains. Each action has flowed naturally into the next, each reinforcing the other, until the noblewoman's routine becomes indistinguishable from the very fabric of Inca society. As the sun approaches its highest point, casting a brilliant light over the valley and sharpening the outlines of Cuzco's walls and terraces, the noblewoman prepares for the transition into midday. The rhythm of her day will soon shift again, but the foundation has already been laid. Through rituals at the waka, oversight of production, hospitality toward guests, and participation in communal ceremonies, she has enacted the central values of Tawantinsuyu. Her mourning is no mere prelude. It is a performance of empire, a living tapestry where personal habit, household order, and cosmic alignment converge. And as she sits for a brief moment of repose, sipping from a vessel of chicha, while attendants prepare the next sequence of duties, one can see in her composure the essence of Inca nobility, the ability to transform the ordinary acts of mourning into a reaffirmation of universal order. The hours of dawn have passed, but the lessons they carry will echo through the rest of the day, shaping not only her life, but the lives of all who depend upon her. As the sun nears its zenith, the noblewoman's morning routine transitions once more, shifting from the intimate spaces of ritual and household oversight toward the more expansive demands of community and empire. The earlier hours have been devoted to aligning herself with the gods, reinforcing order within her household, and acknowledging the sacred geography of Cuzco. Now, with the light of Inti at its most brilliant, she prepares to take part in the broader responsibilities that define her position. This movement from private ritual to public obligation reflects the essence of Inca nobility, where personal life was indistinguishable from service to lineage, kinship, and the empire. Within her household, attendants bustle with renewed energy. Clay vessels are cleaned and polished, textiles folded neatly, and baskets of food arranged for presentation. The noblewoman directs these preparations with a calm authority, her gestures subtle yet decisive. She understands that generosity is the cornerstone of power in Tawantinsuyu, and to host others, to distribute food and drink, is not an act of indulgence but of governance. In the Inca world, the ability to give was a measure of authority, for it demonstrated mastery over resources and reaffirmed the principle of reciprocity. Her attendants set before her vessels of chicha, their surfaces gleaming with condensation from the fermenting maize within. Each erpu is a symbol of abundance, a promise of hospitality to come. The noblewoman inspects them carefully, aware that the quality of this brew will reflect directly upon her household. Too weak, and it would dishonor her guests. Too strong, and it might disrupt the harmony of the gathering. Balance, as always, is key. Nearby, food is prepared with equal care. Potatoes are roasted on hot stones, quinoa boiled to a light fluff, and dried fish from coastal regions, rehydrated and seasoned with herbs. The very presence of such diversity on her table demonstrates the reach of the empire, where goods flow from valleys, coasts, and highlands to converge in the capital. Before any food is shared, however, the noblewoman engages in another act of ritual. A small portion of each dish is set aside, placed in vessels, and offered to the earth and the ancestors. Chicha is poured onto the ground, maize kernels scattered, coca leaves burned. These gestures, performed with measured precision, reaffirm the principle that nothing can be consumed without acknowledgement of the forces that provide it. To modern eyes, such acts might appear symbolic. To her, they are as practical and necessary as the food itself. Without them, the act of eating would be incomplete, severed from the cycle of reciprocity that sustains both household and cosmos. Guests begin to arrive in her courtyard, their garments and headdresses marking them as members of noble lineages, allied families, or important retainers. They are received with warmth, offered coca leaves as tokens of respect, and seated according to their status. The noblewoman's composure is serene yet commanding, for she understands that her role is to embody the generosity of her lineage. Wooden cups filled with chicha are passed around, and each sip becomes more than refreshment. It is a binding act of social obligation. To drink from her household's vessels is to enter into a web of reciprocity, a reminder that resources flow outward from her family and that loyalty must flow back in return. The conversations that unfold are layered with meaning. On the surface, guests speak of harvests, of marriages, of rituals recently completed. Beneath these topics, however, lies the constant negotiation of power and obligation. A relative mentions the successful completion of a labor project, subtly reminding the noblewoman of her household's contribution. An ally requests additional textiles for an upcoming festival, couching the request in the language of kinship. Each exchange is polite, measured, infused with the understanding that generosity will be repaid, that no bond is ever one-sided. The noblewoman listens attentively, responding with gestures of approval, gifts of coca leaves, or the promise of support. She knows that her words carry weight not simply because of her lineage, but because of the obligations she upholds. In the Inca world, authority was not maintained through coercion alone, but through the constant reaffirmation of reciprocity. Her ability to host, to give, to listen, and to respond ensures that her household remains at the heart of this web. As the gathering progresses, musicians arrive, their instruments filling the courtyard with sound. Flutes carved from bone or wood, drums fashioned from stretched hides, and shells that produce haunting tones create an atmosphere of both festivity and solemnity. Music in the Inca world was never mere entertainment. It was a conduit of the sacred, a rhythm that aligned human activity with cosmic cycles. The noblewoman allows herself a moment of reflection as the melodies rise, recognizing that the sounds echo across centuries. carrying with them the memory of ancestors and the presence of deities. The guests, encouraged by the music and the chicha, engage more freely, though always within the bounds of propriety. Laughter mingles with prayer, conversation with song. The noblewoman's role in this setting is both central and subtle. She does not dominate the gathering but facilitates it, ensuring that harmony is maintained, that each guest feels acknowledged, and that the flow of reciprocity remains unbroken. Her composure and grace are as much a form of governance as any decree, for they embody the order expected of the noble elite. Analysis of such gatherings reveals the mechanisms by which the Inca elite maintained cohesion. In the absence of written contracts, it was these shared meals, these exchanges of chicha and coca, that bound households together. The noblewoman's mourning, therefore, is not simply a sequence of private rituals and household tasks. It is a stage upon which the politics of the empire are enacted in miniature. To overlook her role would be to misunderstand the very fabric of Inca governance, where women of noble status served as crucial mediators of kinship, economy, and ritual. As the sun reaches its highest point, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard, the gathering gradually comes to a close. Guests rise, offering parting words and gestures of respect, leaving behind tokens of gratitude or promises of future support.
Ow.
The noblewoman accepts these with quiet dignity, aware that each farewell is also a reaffirmation of obligation. When the last visitor departs, she allows herself a brief moment of rest, sipping water and breathing deeply of the mountain air. Her mourning has stretched across realms of intimacy and public life, weaving together ritual, governance, and social obligation into a seamless whole. What began with the quiet act of chewing coca leaves at dawn has expanded into a series of interactions that sustain not only her household but the broader networks of kinship and empire. Each gesture has mattered, each offering carried weight, each word shaped bonds that will endure beyond the day. As she gazes upward at the sun now at its zenith, the noblewoman prepares to transition into the next phase of her day. Midday will bring its own responsibilities, larger gatherings, perhaps participation in temple ceremonies, oversight of artisans preparing for festivals, but the foundation has already been laid. The morning has not been idle or ornamental. It has been a deliberate enactment of power, piety, and reciprocity, a performance in which her body, her household, and her lineage have all played essential roles. And so as the city of Cuzco hums with the sounds of laborers in the fields, artisans at their looms, priests at their temples, and runners racing along the roads, the noblewoman stands at the threshold of midday. Her mourning complete, her obligations fulfilled, or in her presence still radiating the authority of a lineage tied inseparably to the sun and the empire it sustains. The sun now sits almost directly above Cuzco, its brilliance scattering across rooftops, courtyards, and the terraces that ring the sacred valley. The noblewoman feels the warmth upon her face as she steps into the open air once more, her mourning having already carried her through prayers, household oversight, and the gatherings that knit her kin and allies into a web of obligation. Now, she must turn her attention to the greater ceremonial demands of the day. For midday is a moment of heightened sacred significance. At this hour, Inti, the sun god, is at his most powerful, and the city itself seems to pause in reverence. Her attendants adjust her garments with meticulous care. The anaku she wears for the midday ceremonies is not the simple woolen one of the early morning, nor the slightly more embellished one for household gatherings, but a garment of exquisite detail, woven with geometric motifs that signal both her lineage and her devotion. The fabric, soft yet strong, is dyed in deep hues of crimson and gold, colors that echo the brilliance of the sun and the vitality of blood. Silver pins hold the folds in place, their polished surfaces catching the midday light, transforming her body into a canvas of shimmering symbols. Upon her head rests a headdress adorned with feathers, rare and precious, gathered from distant forests that remind all who see them of the empire's vast reach. The procession to the temple begins quietly, but its significance is unmistakable. A small retinue of attendants and kin accompany her, carrying offerings prepared earlier in the morning. Ceramic vessels of chicha, baskets of maize, cloth folded in precise squares, and small figures molded from dal are arranged with care. for each object carries meaning in the ritual economy of the Inca world. The streets are alive with movement, farmers unloading produce, artisans displaying wares, and messengers racing through the alleys, yet the noblewoman's passage commands attention. People step aside, bow their heads slightly, and offer coca leaves in gestures of respect. She returns their offerings with quiet dignity, a reminder that hierarchy and reciprocity are ever present, even in the most ordinary of encounters. As she approaches the temple precinct, the architecture itself declares the sacredness of the place. The walls, built of finely cut stones fitted so perfectly that no mortar was required, rise in quiet majesty. These stones, quarried from distant mountains and transported through immense collective labor, stand as a testament to the empire's power and the devotion of its people. For her, they also mark the boundary between the profane and the sacred, the moment when the duties of household give way to the duties of lineage and cosmos. Inside the temple courtyard, priests and other nobles have already gathered. Their garments, like hers, speak of wealth and status. Yet each is carefully coated with patterns that reveal clan affiliation, rank, and ritual role. The air is thick with the scent of burning herbs, the smoke rising in delicate columns that blur the boundary between earth and sky. Drums beat slowly, their rhythm steady, echoing the heartbeat of the empire itself. The noblewoman takes her place among the assembled, her posture erect, her expression solemn. A priest intones prayers in Quechua, his voice rising and falling in cadences that have been repeated across generations. The words are not casual, they invoke Inti, Pachamama, and the ancestors, weaving a net of meaning that connects the present to the past, the living to the dead, the earthly to the divine. She listens intently, her gaze fixed on the offerings arranged before the altar. When her moment comes, she steps forward, carrying in her hands a small vessel of chicha. With deliberate precision, she tilts the vessel, pouring the golden liquid onto the earth. The act is simple, yet profound, an acknowledgement that what is received must also be given back. That abundance flows not only into households, but outward into the cosmos. She follows this with the offering of coca leaves, carefully arranged and cast into the fire. The smoke that rises is not merely the residue of burning plants, but the visible form of prayers ascending to the heavens. Other nobles add their offerings, textiles, food, miniature figures of gold or silver, and together, these gestures create a collective expression of devotion. The noblewoman's presence among them is essential. Her participation is both a personal act of piety and a public demonstration of her household alignment with the empire's spiritual order. To abstain would be unthinkable, for her lineage's legitimacy is bound to these ceremonies, its authority affirmed by the gods themselves through ritual observance. Once the offerings are complete, the ritual shifts into a more communal form. Priests distribute small portions of chicha to the assembled nobles, and the noblewoman raises her cup in unison with the others. They drink together, sealing their collective act with a shared gesture. The taste of maize, fermented and rich, carries with it the memory of fields tilled by countless hands, the labor of men and women across the empire whose work makes such rituals possible. Each sip is thus both a pleasure and a reminder of responsibility. After the libations, conversation resumes among the nobles. They speak in low tones of upcoming festivals, of the scheduling of labor obligations, of the movements of armies, and the needs of the people. For the noblewoman, these discussions require attentiveness. Though she does not command armies directly, her influence is woven into the political fabric through marriage ties, kinship obligations, and her household's control of resources. Words measured and deliberate help shape consensus, guide decisions, and reaffirm alliances. In this way, her midday presence in the temple is as political as it is religious. Analysis of such scenes reveals the deep integration of governance and ritual in the Inca world. Unlike later societies where religion and politics could be separated, in Tawantinsuyu, they were two facets of the same reality. Authority flowed through ritual, and ritual reinforced authority. To participate in temple ceremonies was to govern, to manage resources, to shape alliances. The noblewoman's role in this process underscores the centrality of elite women to the functioning of the empire. They were not ornamental figures confined to domestic spaces, but active agents whose presence in ritual and politics sustained the social order. When the formalities of the ceremony conclude, the atmosphere lightens slightly. Musicians strike livelier rhythms, and some nobles allow themselves smiles, even laughter. The noblewoman exchanges words of courtesy with acquaintances, ensuring that each feels recognized and respected. In these moments, the bonds of kinship and alliance are strengthened not only through solemn ritual, but also through the simple warmth of human interaction. She returns to her household in the early afternoon, sun still blazing above, but beginning its slow arc toward the west. The procession home is less formal than the one that brought her to the temple, yet it retains its dignity. Children playing in the streets pause to watch her pass, their eyes wide at the sight of her fine garments and the attendants who accompany her. For them, she is a living symbol of the empire's greatness, a reminder that their own labor and devotion connect them to something vast and enduring. Back in her courtyard, she removes the ceremonial garments, entrusting them to attendants who will clean and store them with great care. Such clothing is not worn casually. It is imbued with meaning and must be preserved for future rituals. She changes into garments of slightly lighter weave, more suited to the afternoon tasks that await her. Her morning has been long, filled with acts of devotion, generosity, and governance, yet she shows no sign of weariness. For her, these acts are not burdens, but affirmations of her role, the fulfillment of obligations that give shape to her life and meaning to her authority. As the midday heat settles over Cuzco, she allows herself a brief meal: quinoa soup, roasted maize, perhaps a piece of llama meat. The food is simple but nourishing, a reminder that even amid grandeur and ritual, the body must be sustained. Before eating, she once again offers a small portion to Pachamama, a gesture so ingrained that it requires no conscious thought. Her attendants follow her example, reinforcing the cycle of reciprocity that binds them all. This pause for nourishment is more than a moment of physical replenishment. It is also a time of reflection, a chance for the noblewoman to consider the events of the morning and to prepare for the obligations of the afternoon.
Ooh.
She knows that the day's rhythm will continue, that ceremonies, discussions, and acts of generosity will unfold until the sun sets and darkness invites another cycle of ritual. But for now, as she sits in the shade of her courtyard, listening to the faint sounds of the city around her, she embodies the essence of Inca nobility, a life in which every act, from the simplest to the most elaborate, is woven into the fabric of cosmos and empire. The sun now leans ever so slightly westward, its brilliance still intense yet softened by the faintest hint of approaching afternoon. The noblewoman, refreshed by her brief meal and shaded rest, rises once more to engage in the duties that await her. The transition from morning to afternoon does not diminish her responsibilities. Rather, it signals a shift in focus. Where the earlier hours emphasized ritual devotion and household cohesion, the later part of the day expands into the broader realms of political exchange, artisan oversight, and preparation for the ceremonies that sustain both kinship and empire. Her first concern is the artisans whose work sustains the prestige of her household. She steps into a side courtyard where weavers sit before their looms, their fingers moving with practiced precision as they interlace strands of wool and cotton into textiles of remarkable complexity. The air is filled with the soft rhythm of weaving, a sound that, though quiet, carries immense cultural weight. For in Tawantinsuyu, cloth was more than mere material, it was wealth, it was gift, it was ritual. Textiles bound people together in cycles of reciprocity, marked political alliances, and served as offerings to gods and ancestors. The noblewoman moves among the weavers, pausing to examine their work. She traces a finger along a pattern of stepped diamonds, recognizing its association with her lineage. Another textile bears motifs drawn from sacred animals: the condor, the puma, the serpentine, carefully placed to invoke cosmic order. She speaks gently to the artisans, praising their skill, suggesting refinements, ensuring that the standards of her household remain impeccable. The weavers look up with deference, their respect for her evident, for they know that their labor not only sustains her prestige, but also connects them to the larger networks of empire. Nearby, other artisans work in different media. Metalworkers polish silver pins, their surfaces gleaming with a brightness that reflects both sunlight and status. Potters shape clay into vessels, their designs echoing ancient traditions, yet adapted to the noble household's needs. Featherworkers arrange vibrant plumes into headdresses and ornaments. Each piece, a fragment of the empire's vast geography brought into tangible form. The noblewoman observes their progress, her eye attuned not only to beauty, but also to meaning. Every object carries symbolic weight, every pattern, every feather a marker of identity, devotion, and authority. Analysis reveals the significance of this moment. By overseeing artisans, the noblewoman is not merely indulging in aesthetics, she's enacting governance. In the Inca world, wealth was not accumulated for private indulgence but redistributed through ritual, gift, and obligation. To ensure the production of fine textiles, vessels, and ornaments was to prepare for the constant demands of reciprocity. Her authority, therefore, is measured not by what she keeps but by what she gives. The artisan's labor is the foundation upon which her generosity rests, and her attentive oversight ensures that their output will meet the expectations of kin, allies, and gods alike. After ensuring that the work proceeds smoothly, she turns her attention to preparations for an upcoming festival. In Cuzco, the cycle of ritual is unending, each month marked by ceremonies tied to agriculture, the cosmos, or political renewal. The noblewoman's household is expected to contribute resources, food, and participants, and she must ensure that everything is in readiness. Attendants consult her on quantities of maize beer to be brewed, on the allocation of textiles to be distributed, on the roles that her kin will play in the processions. Her decisions, though logistical in appearance, carry deep political weight. To give generously will enhance her household's standing. To fail in preparation would invite dishonor. In the broader community, other noble households are making similar preparations. The noblewoman is aware that these festivals are not only acts of devotion, but also arenas of political competition. Each household strives to demonstrate its wealth, its piety, its alignment with the cosmic order. For her, the challenge is to navigate this environment with grace, to give abundantly without excess, to display devotion without arrogance. Her wisdom lies not only in her ability to command resources, but also in her capacity to balance. To maintain harmony in a world where imbalance could invite both human envy and divine disfavor. The afternoon brings visitors once more, though these differ from the kin and neighbors who joined her morning gatherings. Now she receives individuals connected to the administration of the empire, messengers bearing news from other provinces, officials tasked with overseeing labor obligations, priests coordinating rituals across Cusco. Their presence underscores the reach of her responsibilities. She is not merely the mistress of a household, but a participant in the governance of Tawantinsuyu itself. Her authority extending outward through networks of kinship and obligation. A messenger kneels before her, presenting a quipu knotted strings that serve as records of labor and resources. The noblewoman examines it carefully, guided by attendants skilled in interpretation. The knots speak of maize harvested, cloth woven, llamas counted. Each detail matters, for from these records flow the obligations of her household and the expectations of others. She acknowledges the messenger with words of gratitude, rewarding him with coca leaves, for even the bearer of information participates in the web of reciprocity. Another visitor, a priest, discusses preparations for an upcoming solar ceremony. He speaks of the alignment of sightlines, the timing of libations, the necessity of noble households to provide offerings. The noblewoman listens attentively, her mind already turning to the textiles and food she has set aside for this purpose. She understands that her presence at such ceremonies is not optional but essential. The empire's cohesion depends upon the participation of every noble lineage, and her household's devotion will be measured by the quality and abundance of its offerings. As these discussions unfold, the noblewoman embodies a paradox that lies at the heart of Inca governance. She is both deeply embedded in the routines of her household and profoundly connected to the vast machinery of empire. Her afternoon illustrates this duality. One moment she oversees the weaving of a garment. The next, she listens to reports of harvests from distant valleys. In both cases, her actions reinforce the same principles: reciprocity, devotion, and balance. When the visitors depart, she steps once more into her courtyard, the sun now casting longer shadows that stretch across the polished stones. She pauses to breathe deeply, her gaze lifting toward the distant mountains that encircle Cusco. To her, these are not mere geographical features but apis, sacred beings that watch over the people. She offers them coca leaves in silent prayer, acknowledging their presence, reaffirming her connection to the landscape that sustains her. Her attendants approach with fresh water, pouring it over her hands in a gesture of purification. She accepts the act with quiet gratitude, recognizing that even in the midst of governance and ritual, the body requires care. The afternoon heat has settled over the city, yet she shows no sign of fatigue. Her day is far from over, for as the sun begins its descent, new obligations will arise, ceremonies will continue, and the rhythm of reciprocity will demand fresh expression. In the stillness of this moment, however, one sees clearly the essence of her role. She is not a passive ornament of noble lineage, but an active agent whose daily life sustains the empire itself. Every act of oversight, every offering, every word of counsel weaves her more deeply into the fabric of Tawantinsuyu. Her morning has flowed seamlessly into afternoon, each phase distinct yet united by the same principles, until her very life becomes a microcosm of the empire's order. And as the sun moves lower in the sky, casting its golden light across the sacred valley, the noblewoman prepares once more to rise and engage, to step into the rituals and responsibilities that await in the hours before dusk. Her routine is far from complete, for in the Inca world, every moment of the day is charged with meaning, every action a reaffirmation of cosmic and social harmony. The sun now begins its slow descent, casting a golden light across the city of Cuzco, softening the sharp edges of stone walls and bathing the terraces in a warm glow. The noblewoman feels this change not only in the air but within herself. For the rhythm of her day bends with the movement of the sun, where the earlier hours were marked by ritual dawn, household oversight. In midday ceremony, the late afternoon becomes a time of transition, of preparation for what lies ahead as dusk approaches. In this shifting light, her duties take on a new texture, less about initiating acts of devotion, more about consolidating the work already begun, reaffirming bonds, and preparing offerings for the evening that will follow. She begins this phase of her day by returning to the artisans who labor under her patronage. Their looms, workshops, and benches are still alive with activity. For time is precious, and the demands of the empire relentless. Yet the atmosphere now feels slightly more urgent, for the approaching evening will soon call for the display or distribution of what they create. The noblewoman moves among them with calm composure, her presence both supervisory and inspirational. To the weavers she offers encouragement, reminding them that their cloth will clothe not only her kin, but the gods themselves when draped upon altars. To the metalworkers she offers guidance, ensuring that pins and ornaments gleam with the brilliance expected at ritual feasts. Her words carry weight, not because she commands with severity, but because her authority rests on the certainty that the objects fashioned here are not mere goods but sacred vessels of meaning. Nearby, young attendants practice their roles for the evening. Some will carry torches to light processions, others will distribute food and chicha, while others will perform songs or dances. The noblewoman watches carefully, correcting posture, refining gestures, ensuring that every movement reflects grace and discipline. To an outsider, such attention to detail might appear excessive, yet in the Inca world, every performance, whether a dance, a song, or the act of pouring a drink, was a ritual in miniature, each gesture reinforcing cosmic harmony. Her insistence on perfection is not vanity but duty, for disorder in performance could mirror disorder in society, and disorder in society could invite misfortune from the gods. As preparations unfold, visitors once again approach. This time they are not only nobles and priests, but also representatives of commoner households connected to her lineage. They arrive with gifts, bundles of maize, woven baskets, small animals offered in acknowledgement of her authority and as part of the ceaseless cycle of reciprocity. She receives them graciously, thanking each visitor with a gesture of warmth and providing coca leaves or portions of chicha in return. In this way, the late afternoon becomes a marketplace of obligations, where generosity and gratitude circulate freely, weaving the community together in bonds of loyalty. Among these visitors are elders who speak of upcoming communal labor projects. They describe terraces in need of repair, canals requiring maintenance, roads demanding attention. The noblewoman listens with care, recognizing that these works are the lifeblood of the empire. Without them, crops would fail, travel would falter, communication would break down. She promises to send members of her household to contribute, for she knows that participation in such projects is both duty and honor. Her willingness to commit resources strengthens her household's reputation, demonstrating that nobility is not exemption from labor, but leadership within it. The analysis of such exchanges reveals how deeply intertwined political authority was with communal obligation. Unlike later systems where elites might distance themselves from the laboring population, the Inca nobility's prestige depended upon active engagement in collective projects. The noblewoman's presence in these conversations affirms that her household stands not apart from but within the structures of reciprocity. Her authority is legitimized, not by isolation, but by constant participation. As the light begins to soften further, her attention turns to preparation for evening rituals. Attendants lay out offerings on low tables, bowls of maize, vessels of chicha, small effigies fashioned from dough and adorned with feathers. Textiles are folded neatly, ready to be presented at altars or distributed to kin. The noblewoman inspects each item, adjusting the placement of a bowl, smoothing the fold of a cloth, ensuring that symmetry and order prevail. In her mind, these gestures are not trivial, but essential. Just as the cosmos is ordered through the cycles of the sun and moon, so too must human ritual reflect balance and precision. When all is in readiness, she allows herself a brief moment of repose, sitting quietly in her courtyard as the air cools and shadows lengthen. The sounds of the city shift with the hour. The clatter of artisans begins to fade, replaced by the distant beat of drums as musicians rehearse for evening ceremonies. The voices of children grow quieter as they are called home, while the calls of herders returning with their flocks echo faintly from the hills. The noblewoman listens with attentiveness, for in these sounds she hears not only the life of the city, but also the rhythm of empire itself. Her attendants bring her a fresh cup of chicha, and she sips slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun prepares to descend. She knows that dusk is not an end but a threshold, a moment when the boundaries between day and night, human and divine, blur. The rituals that will unfold in the coming hours depend upon the foundation laid during this late afternoon. Her care in overseeing artisans, her generosity in receiving visitors, her attentiveness in preparing offerings, all of these acts converge now, ready to be transformed into the collective expressions of devotion that sustain Tawantinsuyu. As she rises once more, gathering her attendants and signaling that preparations are complete, the noblewoman embodies the essence of Inca nobility. Her day, still far from over, has already traversed realms of intimacy and community, ritual and politics, household and empire. Each phase has flowed seamlessly into the next, until the late afternoon stands as both culmination and anticipation, a moment when all that has come before gathers itself in readiness for what is yet to unfold. And as the golden light bathes the city of Cuzco, illuminating its walls, its streets, its temples, and its people, the noblewoman moves toward the duties of dusk. The sun may be descending, but her responsibilities rise ever higher, carrying her into the evening with the same grace, an authority that has marked her every action since the first light of dawn. The sun slips lower, its brilliance mellowing into deep gold and casting long shadows that stretch across the courtyards of Cuzco. The noblewoman watches as light lingers on the peaks, surrounding the valley, gilding the mountains in radiance before it begins to fade. For her, this is not simply the approach of darkness but a sacred passage, a transition as meaningful as the dawn. Just as she greeted the rising sun with prayers and offerings, so too must she accompany its departure with ceremony. Evening in the Inca world was not the closing of a day, but a hinge upon which balance rested, the dialogue between day and night, between Inti and the moon, between the visible and the hidden. Within her household, preparations intensify. Torches are lit in the courtyards, their flames flickering against stone walls and creating patterns that seem almost alive. Musicians gather, tuning their flutes and testing the steady rhythms of drums. The scent of roasted maize and simmering stews drifts through the air, mingling with the fragrance of burning herbs placed upon small braziers. Attendants move with deliberate swiftness, carrying vessels of chicha, arranging woven cloths upon benches, and setting aside baskets of food. The noblewoman oversees it all with serene precision, her presence ensuring that order prevails even in the flurry of activity. As twilight deepens, guests arrive once more. Their garments, though practical for the cooling air, are adorned with vibrant patterns that catch the torchlight. They enter the courtyard with gestures of respect, offering coca leaves to their hostess, which she receives and reciprocates in kind. Each exchange of coca is more than courtesy, it is a reaffirmation of trust, a reminder that every bond is sustained by the circulation of gifts. She greets each visitor with measured words, her tone warm yet dignified. For this evening is as much about maintaining harmony among people as it is about devotion to the gods. When all are assembled, the first libations are poured. The noblewoman herself takes a vessel of chicha, lifts it to the sky, and allows a portion to spill onto the earth.
Oh.
The gesture, performed countless times across the empire, never loses its gravity. It is the acknowledgement that before humans partake, Pachamama must be honored, that the gods and ancestors must receive their due. Only after this sacred act do the living drink. Wooden cups are passed from hand to hand, and the sound of voices rises in chants and songs, blending devotion with celebration. The feast begins, its abundance a testament to the noblewoman's authority and generosity. Stews of maize and beans, roasted meats, potatoes in countless varieties, and delicacies from distant regions are laid out. Each dish speaks of the empire's reach, of valleys and coasts and mountains united in a single cycle of reciprocity. Guests partake with gratitude, aware that to eat from her household stores is to acknowledge her capacity to give, and in doing so to bind themselves more tightly to her lineage. The noblewoman herself eats sparingly, her role less that of indulgence than of oversight. She ensures that each guest is served, that no vessel remains empty, that musicians are provided food and drink, that attendants remain attentive. Her gaze moves constantly, reading faces, noting gestures, discerning whether harmony prevails. For her, the feast is not only nourishment but governance, another theater where reciprocity is enacted and alliance is affirmed. As the meal progresses, music swells. Flutes produce clear, haunting tones that drift upward into the night. Drums maintain a steady rhythm, and rattles add a shimmering undercurrent. Dancers step into the courtyard, their movements measured yet expressive, their bodies telling stories of creation, conquest, and devotion. The noblewoman watches intently, for she knows that dance in the Inca world was never mere entertainment. Each step, each gesture, is a form of ritual, a reenactment of myths, and a reminder of cosmic order. By sponsoring and observing such performances, she participates in the preservation of memory and meaning. At moments, she herself joins in, rising with a group of noblewomen to move in slow, graceful patterns around the courtyard. Their steps are small, their gestures restrained, yet the significance is profound. By dancing together, they embody the harmony of kinship, their movements a reflection of balance within the community. The torches flicker against their garments, casting shadows that seem to weave with the music itself, till the entire courtyard becomes a living tapestry of sound, light, and motion. Amid the music and feasting, ritual continues. At intervals, priests step forward to offer prayers, their voices carrying over the crowd. They invoke Inti as his light fades, acknowledging his departure to the underworld, and petitioning his return with equal brilliance at dawn. They call upon Mama Kila, the moon, to rise and guard the night, to guide women in their tasks, to ensure fertility of field and womb alike. The noblewoman listens, her heart attuned to the rhythm of these invocations, for they articulate the very principles that guide her life. As night deepens, the atmosphere shifts. The revelry softens into solemnity, and attention turns toward the altar prepared in the courtyard. Upon it rest the offerings she had overseen earlier: maize, chicha, effigies, textiles. With deliberate steps, she approaches the altar, flanked by attendants carrying braziers. The flames illuminate her face, casting it in warm glow as she raises her hands in prayer. She offers coca leaves, arranges them in symbolic triads, and places them upon the fire. She pours chicha once more, the liquid sizzling as it touches the coals, releasing a fragrant steam that mingles with the smoke. The courtyard falls silent, save for the crackle of fire and the low murmur of the priest's chants. The noblewoman's posture is steady, her gestures measured, her devotion unmistakable. She does not act alone, but as the vessel of her lineage. carrying the weight of her ancestors and the hopes of her descendants. Every eye upon her recognizes this, and in that moment, her presence embodies the union of household, kin, and cosmos. When the ritual concludes, the silence lingers before giving way once more to music and conversation. Guests resume their feasting, though now with a renewed sense of solemn joy, aware that they have shared not only food, but also communion with the divine. The noblewoman allows herself a sip of chicha, her expression serene. She feels the balance restored, the obligations of the day fulfilled, the bond between people and gods reaffirmed. Analysis of this evening scene reveals the intricate layering of roles the noblewoman inhabits. She is at once hostess, priestess, politician, and matriarch. Her household is the stage upon which the empire's principles are enacted, her body the vessel through which reciprocity flows. Without her presence, the rituals would lack completeness. Without her generosity, the feast would lose its binding power. Her evening routine thus illustrates with striking clarity how Inca nobility was not a matter of privilege alone, but of profound responsibility. As the torches burn low and the stars emerge above the valley, the noblewoman begins to guide her guests toward departure. Farewells are exchanged, gifts reciprocated, promises spoken. Each gesture ensures that the web of reciprocity remains strong, that tonight's abundance will ripple outward into tomorrow's obligations. When the last guest departs, she allows herself a quiet moment of solitude, sitting in the courtyard and gazing at the night sky. The constellations, familiar yet always awe-inspiring, remind her that she is part of a vast order, her life but one thread in the fabric of cosmos and empire. And as the moon rises high, bathing the city in its silver glow, the noblewoman reflects upon the fullness of her day. From the first light of dawn to the deep silence of night, she has enacted the roles expected of her, weaving devotion, governance, and generosity into a seamless whole. Her evening is not the conclusion of her routine, but its culmination. The moment when all the acts of the day converge into harmony. In her life, as in the empire, the cycle continues, ever balanced, ever renewed. The torches gutter softly now, their flames diminish to steady glows, casting long and wavering shadows along the stone walls of the courtyard. Most of the guests have departed, their laughter and footsteps fading into the night streets of Cuzco. Yet within her household, the noblewoman's duties do not end. For in the Inca world, night is no void but a realm rich with presence, the realm of ancestors, of spirits, of stars that guide and watch. The noblewoman knows that before her body can yield to rest, her spirit must attend to obligations that belong to the hours after dark. She begins by retreating to a smaller chamber, one set aside for more private devotions. Here, away from the noise of feasting and the activity of attendance, she finds the silence necessary for communion. A small altar has been prepared, its surface lined with offerings more intimate than those displayed. Earlier small bundles of coca leaves tied with colored thread miniature vessels, filled with water and a few personal ornaments that belonged to her mother and grandmother. To outsiders, such objects might seem simple, but to her, they are vessels of memory, tangible links to the lineage that sustains her identity. She kneels before the altar, arranging the coca leaves into symbolic triads, whispering words of gratitude and remembrance. She speaks the names of her forebears, recalling their deeds, their counsel, their sacrifices. The act is not one of mourning, but of presence. For in the Inca conception, the dead do not vanish, but remain woven into the fabric of the living community. Their mummified bodies may rest in sanctuaries, carried out during festivals, and consulted for guidance. But their spirits move freely in the night air, attentive to the devotions of their descendants. By calling upon them now, the noblewoman ensures that her household remains under their protection and wisdom. An attendant enters quietly, carrying a small flame in a clay lamp, which she places beside the altar. The noblewoman uses it to burn offerings of herbs, the smoke curling upward in fragile spirals that seem to dissolve into the darkness. She watches it rise and vanish, imagining that her prayers ride upon it, carried into realms beyond sight. This simple ritual binds together the elements fire, air, earth, water, into a unity that mirrors the cosmic order. In her heart, she feels the weight of the day lifting, transmuted into devotion, into continuity. When the prayers conclude, she sits quietly, letting the silence wash over her. Outside, the sounds of the city have softened, a dog barking faintly in the distance. The rhythmic clop of hooves from a messenger riding late through the streets, the occasional murmur of wind through the thatched roofs. Above, the stars emerge in their full brilliance, no longer obscured by the glow of the setting sun. The noblewoman knows many of their names, for the Inca did not merely trace patterns among the stars but also discerned dark constellations formed by the shadows of the Milky Way. To her eyes, the great celestial river contains the llama, the serpent, the toad creatures imbued with meaning, guides for agricultural and ritual cycles. She gazes upward, reading the heavens as a text written by the gods, affirming once again that the rhythms of the sky are reflected in the rhythms of her life. Soon members of her household join her for a final gathering before sleep. They sit in a circle, sharing coca leaves, recounting the day's events, and speaking of tasks to come. Younger attendants listen attentively, absorbing not only instruction but also the tone of responsibility carried in her words. She reminds them that service within a noble household is not servitude, but participation in the greater balance of reciprocity. Each gesture, no matter how small, is part of a chain that stretches from household to empire to cosmos. Her words are not stern but firm, offering guidance rather than command. She knows that the strength of her household lies not in fear but in loyalty, not in coercion but in shared purpose. From this gathering, one can see how the noblewoman's authority is enacted, not only in public rituals, but also in private instruction. Her role extends beyond ritual performance into the shaping of values, the transmission of knowledge, the nurturing of bonds that ensure continuity across generations. In these late hours, when the city grows quiet and shadows deepen, she becomes not just a figure of wealth and lineage, but a teacher, a custodian of memory and meaning. After the household disperses, she allows herself a moment of personal reflection. Attendants help her change into lighter garments suitable for rest, woven from soft fibers, their patterns simpler than those she wore during the day, yet still elegant. Her hair is loosened, her ornaments set aside, her skin washed with water scented by herbs. These gestures, intimate and quiet, remind her that care of the body is also a form of devotion. For the body is the vessel through which service to gods and empire is enacted. Even rest in the Inca understanding is not idleness, but preparation for renewed responsibility at dawn. Before lying down, she takes one final step. She walks to the edge of her courtyard and looks out toward the mountains now shadowed under the vast night sky. Their silhouettes stand like guardians, their presence constant, eternal. She whispers a final prayer, asking that their strength endure within her, that their stability mirror her own resolve. Then she returns inside, lies upon the woven mats prepared for her, and allows her body to yield to the embrace of rest. Sleep comes not as a rupture, but as another passage, another transition within the cycle. She knows that in dreams the ancestors may visit, that the gods may send visions. The boundaries between seen and unseen dissolve. Her mind drifts into that realm, carrying with it the residue of prayers, the echo of music, the scent of burning herbs. In sleep, as in waking, she remains woven into the fabric of reciprocity. A noblewoman whose life is both ordinary and extraordinary, both personal and cosmic, and thus her day concludes, not with finality, but with continuation. For in the Inca world, every ending is but the seed of a new beginning. The noblewoman's rest is the empire's rest, her breath part of the great rhythm of Tawantinsuyu. Tomorrow, the sun will rise once more, and with it, her duties will begin again. Yet for now, under the canopy of stars and the watchful gaze of ancestors, she surrenders to the sacred quiet of night, embodying the balance and devotion that have marked her every hour from dawn to dusk. The courtyard lies silent now, its torches extinguished, its stone walls bathed only in the faint glow of moonlight. The noblewoman has surrendered her body to rest, yet her spirit continues its journey. In the Inca world, sleep was never seen as a void or an absence, but as another realm of existence, space where human souls touch the edges of the unseen. Dreams were understood not as random fragments of thought, but as messages, visitations, and encounters with forces beyond the waking world. For a noblewoman whose life carried both ritual weight and political responsibility, dreams were more than personal. They were potential omens, guidance for her household, her lineage, even for the empire itself. As she drifts deeper into slumber, her breathing slows, steady as the rhythm of drums she had heard earlier in the evening. Her attendants rest nearby, ready to serve if needed, but all is quiet. She enters the world of visions, a space where the boundary between ancestors and living kin dissolves, where landscapes blur and reform, where symbols emerge with clarity sharper than daylight. In her dream, she finds herself walking once more across the terraces of the valley. The fields are lush with maize, their stalks gleaming with golden light, not of the sun, but of something more luminous, something eternal. As she moves, she hears voices rising from the earth itself, the voices of ancestors speaking in tones both familiar and strange. They call her by name, reminding her that her life is but one link in the chain of reciprocity that stretches backward and forward through time. Such dreams were common in the lives of the Inca elite. The belief that ancestors could speak through visions was deeply ingrained, shaping decisions, inspiring rituals, and confirming authority. In her dream, the noblewoman feels the gravity of this truth. She kneels before the glowing stalks of maize, offering coca leaves, even within the vision. She hears the whispers of her grandmother, reminding her to remain vigilant, to embody generosity, to lead with patience. She hears the laughter of her mother, assuring her that joy and abundance are as vital as duty. These messages do not surprise her. They affirm what she already knows, but must never forget that nobility is not only inheritance, but responsibility. Not only privilege, but service. The dream shifts, as dreams often do, carrying her from fields to mountains. She finds herself at the peak of the great fortress that crowns the city of Cuzco. Yet in the dream, its stones glow as if alive, their massive forms humming with power. She places her hand upon them and feels warmth radiating through her palm, as though the earth itself pulses beneath her skin. She looks outward across the valley, where rivers gleam like threads of silver, weaving through the land in endless patterns. The stars above align into figures she recognizes: the llama, the serpent, the condor, dark constellations that speak not of emptiness, but of presence. She understands in this vision that her household, her city, her empire are woven into a greater tapestry, each thread dependent upon the others, each pattern essential to the whole. Analysis of such imagery reveals how dreams functioned as both personal and communal experiences. For the Inca, the cosmos was not distant or abstract, but immediate, embodied in every mountain, river, and star. To dream of these elements was to be reminded of their power, their sacred role in sustaining life. A noblewoman's visions could thus serve as validation for rituals, guiding her in the offerings she must make, the ceremonies she must sponsor, the values she must instill. Her dream, it affirms the harmony she strives to maintain in waking life, connecting her sense of duty with the vast order of earth and sky. As the dream deepens, she finds herself walking along a road lined with figures cloaked in woven garments. Some faces she recognizes as kin, others as priests, still others as unfamiliar yet ancient. They do not speak, but gesture for her to follow, leading her toward a radiant light on the horizon. She senses that the light is both beginning and end, life and death, creation and return. Yet she does not fear it, for she knows that in Inca belief, death is not severance, but transition. A passage into the company of ancestors, a continuation of reciprocity. She walks calmly, feeling the weight of countless generations behind her and the promise of countless generations ahead. In this vision, she is not merely herself, but a vessel carrying the essence of her people forward. When she wakes, the first faint light of dawn has not yet appeared. The air is cool, the courtyard still. She lies in silence for a moment, recalling the images with clarity. In the Inca world, dreams were not dismissed upon waking, but carried into the day. Shared with kin, interpreted by priests, woven into decisions both mundane and monumental. She considers which elements of her vision are for herself and which must be spoken aloud. The voice of her grandmother urging vigilance. The warmth of the stones. At the road lined with figures, these are not secrets to be hoarded, but guidance to be shared. She understands that by articulating her dreams, She transforms them into tools for her community, ensuring that the wisdom of the night informs the actions of the day. This practice underscores how sleep itself was sacred in Inca culture. Rest was not idleness, but participation in the cycles of the cosmos. Dreams were not distractions, but dialogues with forces beyond the human. The noblewoman embodies this truth, carrying the weight of her visions with the same composure she carries her woven mantles, her ornaments, her ritual responsibilities. To her, the boundary between sleeping and waking is porous, each state reflecting and informing the other, each a necessary part of the whole. She rises quietly, not yet calling her attendants, choosing instead to sit in the courtyard and gaze once more at the stars. They shimmer faintly in the deep night, the constellations still visible before the coming glow of dawn. She reflects upon the dream's messages, aligning them with her duties, weaving them into the fabric of her intentions. She feels gratitude not only for the visions, but for the opportunity to serve as their interpreter, to embody the bridge between ancestors and descendants. In this moment, she realizes that her life is not defined solely by the rituals she performs or the authority she wields, but by the way she listens to the earth, to the gods, to the ancestors, to the voices that come in dreams. This listening, this attentiveness, is the essence of her nobility. It is what transforms her routine into something sacred, her ordinary gestures into cosmic acts. Her morning will soon arrive, with its rituals and responsibilities, but it will be built upon the foundation of these night visions, as solid and enduring as the stones of Cuzco itself. And so, in the sacred quiet before dawn, the noblewoman sits between worlds, between waking and sleeping, between night and day, between ancestor and descendant. She embodies the balance that defines Tawantinsuyu, a balance sustained not only by action, but also by reflection, not only by ritual, but also by dream. The night lies heavy and still, yet in the silence there is anticipation, as though the world itself waits for the return of light. The noblewoman sits quietly in her courtyard, wrapped in a mantle of soft, woven cloth, her gaze fixed upon the eastern horizon. The stars above shimmer faintly, their brilliance beginning to pale in the face of the light that stirs unseen beyond the mountains. The air is crisp, carrying the coolness of night, and every breath she draws feels sharp and pure, cleansing her lungs, readying her body for the ritual hours that approach. Pre-dawn in the Inca world was a liminal space, a threshold where night's mysteries lingered even as day pressed forward. For the noblewoman, this was one of the most sacred intervals of her daily cycle. Just as dusk demanded offerings to accompany the sun's descent, so too did the first hints of dawn demand preparation for his return. Rising early was not merely a habit of discipline, but an act of devotion, for to greet the sun was to honor the source of life and authority. Ina's reappearance was never assumed, but always welcomed with gratitude and reverence. Her attendants stir softly, moving with quiet steps through the chambers of the household. They prepare braziers, arranging herbs and coals, ensuring that smoke will rise at the appointed moment. They bring vessels of water, still cool from mountain springs, for purification rituals. They lay out fresh garments for their mistress, garments chosen not for luxury alone, but for their symbolism, woven with patterns that evoke the sun's rays, the mountains, and the sacred animals that serve as messengers between worlds. The noblewoman watches their activity with a calm expression, her silence signaling concentration rather than detachment. She begins her own preparation by washing her hands and face with the spring water offered to her. The cold liquid shocks her skin, awakening her fully, marking a transition from the world of dreams into the duties of the waking day. She rubs coca leaves gently between her fingers, releasing their fragrance, then places them carefully in her mouth. The taste is bitter, grounding her body and spirit, sharpening her awareness. With these gestures, she aligns herself with the natural forces that govern existence: water, plant, and breath. Soon, she dons the garment set out for her, a mantle of vivid red, a color resonant with the sun's energy, fastened by a gold tupu pin shaped with geometric precision. Her hair is rebraided swiftly by attendants, adorned with small ornaments that glint faintly in the dim torchlight. She stands tall, her posture dignified, embodying the continuity of her lineage. To wear such garments at dawn is not vanity but obligation, For the clothing of a noblewoman communicates. Her role as mediator between household and cosmos, between human and divine. The household gathers in the courtyard as the horizon begins to shift, the black of night giving way to a faint band of pale blue. Attendants stand in orderly lines, each holding a small offering bundles of maize, bowls of chicha, folded cloth. Children are present too, their eyes wide with the solemnity of the hour, learning through participation what words alone cannot teach. Musicians ready their instruments, though they remain silent until the first rays appear. The noblewoman takes her place at the center, her presence a point of focus around which all others orient themselves. She raises her arms to the horizon, palms open, and begins to whisper prayers. Her voice is low, steady, yet carries clearly in the quiet courtyard. She calls upon Inti to rise once more, to bring warmth and fertility to the land, to illuminate the paths of her people, to sustain the empire that thrives under his gaze. Words are both supplication and affirmation. For in speaking them, she acknowledges dependence, yet also affirms confidence in the sun's eternal cycle. The first rays break over the mountains, casting a soft glow that transforms the courtyard. The stone walls catch the light, their surfaces warming to gold. Faces of attendants and kin brighten, their eyes reflecting the brilliance of dawn. The noblewoman lowers her arms, then lifts a vessel of chicha. She pours the first portion onto the earth, the liquid dark against the soil. A libation to Pachamama, acknowledging that even the sun's gift must be shared with the living earth. Only after this offering does she drink, passing the vessel to others in turn. Music begins then, the flutes releasing clear, rising notes that seem to chase the sun upward, while drums beat softly, echoing the rhythm of hearts newly awakened. Dancers step into the courtyard, moving in slow circles, their steps measured, their bodies turning in harmony with the rotation of the earth itself. The noblewoman watches, her expression serene, understanding that each gesture mirrors the cosmic order, that each movement is both art and devotion. As the light strengthens, offerings are placed upon the household altar: maize, chicha, textiles, symbols of abundance and labor, tokens of reciprocity. The noblewoman supervises this carefully, ensuring that balance and symmetry govern the arrangement. In her mind, disorder in offerings could reflect disorder in the world, and so she insists upon precision. The altar, once adorned, becomes not only a site of devotion, but also a microcosm of the empire itself, a model of harmony between human effort and divine favor. When the ritual concludes, the household disperses into their duties. Children are guided to their tasks, artisans to their workshops, attendants to their preparations. The noblewoman herself remains in the courtyard for a few moments longer, basking in the growing warmth of the sun. She feels its rays upon her face, a blessing both physical and spiritual, affirming her place within the cycle. For her, the return of the sun is not routine but renewal, the promise that life continues, that order endures. She then turns to the affairs of the morning, already thinking of the guests who will arrive, the artisans whose work she must inspect, the rituals she must sponsor. Yet beneath these thoughts lies the steady foundation of dawn, the assurance that every act of her day is grounded in the cosmic rhythm reaffirmed each morning. Without the dawn ritual, her responsibilities would feel untethered, her authority uncertain. With it, everything flows naturally, as inevitable as the sun's rising. And thus, in the pre-dawn hours that melt into morning light, the noblewoman completes the cycle of night and day. Her dreams have spoken, her prayers have been offered, her household has borne witness, and the sun has returned. She stands now at the threshold of another day, ready once again to weave devotion, duty, and generosity into the fabric of her life. The night has not ended but transformed, its mysteries carried forward into the clarity of daylight. For her, as for the empire she serves, existence is a cycle unbroken, enduring, renewed with every dawn. The sun now climbs steadily above the mountains, no longer a fragile glow on the horizon, but a radiant force that bathes the city of Cuzco in warmth and brilliance. The noblewoman feels its rays upon her face and arms as she steps once more into the heart of her household, the courtyard alive with activity. The air is different now than it was in the pre-dawn hours, where there had been stillness. Now there is movement. Where there had been silence, now there is the rhythm of work. The cycle of a new day has truly begun. Her attendants greet her with fresh energy, for the rituals of dawn have consecrated their labors. She watches as they disperse into their roles, some tending to the weaving rooms where textiles will again be produced, others organizing storerooms, while a few move outward toward the markets with goods to trade or distribute. This bustling rhythm is familiar, yet never mechanical, for every day brings its own demands, unexpected visitors, new messages from officials, shifts in weather, the ebb and flow of communal obligations. The noblewoman has learned to balance continuity with adaptability, for that balance is what ensures harmony not only in her household, but in her role within the larger web of the empire. This morning, a messenger arrives earlier than expected, his tunic still dusted with the grit of long roads. He bows respectfully and delivers a bundle wrapped in cloth, containing a decree from a higher official of the state. The noblewoman listens carefully as the decree is read aloud. News of upcoming ceremonies? Instructions for provisioning certain officials who will soon pass through Cuzco, and a reminder of the offerings expected during a festival dedicated to the moon. She nods, absorbing the information, already turning over in her mind how best to allocate resources and instruct her attendants. To her, such decrees are not burdens, but extensions of the reciprocity that defines Inca order. The empire provides stability and prosperity, and in turn households like hers sustain its rituals and officials. After dismissing the messenger with words of thanks, she returns to her household storerooms to oversee preparations. The granaries hold maize in abundance, carefully measured and recorded, while textiles of fine quality lie folded in bundles, their bright colors awaiting ritual or distribution. She inspects these with practiced eyes, noting which can be spared for imperial use, which should be preserved for her household, and which might be given as gifts to secure alliances. Her decisions are practical but also symbolic, for the movement of goods is never simply economic but woven with meaning. A textile gifted to an ally carries not just warmth but recognition of bond. Maize provided for a festival feeds not only bodies but the cosmic order itself. The noblewoman's children gather at her side, curious to watch and learn. She explains her decisions to them in measured tones, teaching not only what is to be done, but why. She reminds them that wealth in their world is not measured by hoarding, but by generosity. That to give wisely is to grow in honor, and that stinginess weakens the bonds that hold the empire together. In her words, she plants seeds of understanding, ensuring that when her children one day inherit responsibilities, they will do so with clarity of purpose. As the sun rises higher, she moves into the weaving rooms, where women are already at their looms, the rhythm of their work echoing like a soft heartbeat across the chamber. The noblewoman inspects the textiles in progress, admiring the vibrant reds, blacks, and yellows, the geometric patterns that embody meaning as much as beauty. She offers praise for the skill of the weavers, but also gentle correction when symmetry falters or threads loosen. Her involvement is not micromanagement, but stewardship. She ensures that the work produced under her name meets the standards expected of nobility for such textiles. May one day be worn in ceremonies offered in rituals, or presented as tokens of alliance. She pauses beside one loom, her fingers brushing the fibers, and speaks softly of the way weaving mirrors the cosmos. Just as each thread must be interlaced with precision to form a whole, so too must each act of reciprocity, each ritual, each duty be woven together to sustain the empire. The younger weavers listen attentively, their hands still moving as their minds absorb her lesson. In this way, labor is never separate from meaning. Each gesture carries weight beyond the immediate product. Later in the morning, a group of neighboring noblewomen arrive, their garments equally fine, their attendants carrying gifts of maize, beer, and coca leaves. They come not for grand ceremony, but for the quiet yet essential work of maintaining bonds of kinship and alliance. The noblewoman greets them warmly, ushering them into a shaded chamber where mats are spread and vessels of chicha await. They exchange news of harvests, of family health, of imperial decrees. Their words weave a network of trust, reinforcing solidarity among households whose cooperation ensures the empire's stability. As they sit together, sipping from shared vessels, the noblewoman reflects inwardly on the subtle power of such gatherings. No armies march here, no officials issue commands, yet the strength of the empire is being affirmed just as surely as in the Grand Plaza.
These
Conversations, these shared drinks, these exchanged gifts, are the fibers that bind society together. She understands that her role is not only to honor the gods, but to nurture these relationships, to ensure that respect, generosity, and reciprocity flow as steadily as water from a mountain spring. When the visit concludes, she escorts her peers to the courtyard, offering them parting gifts, small bundles of coca leaves. Finely woven sashes, tokens of respect that will travel back with them to their households. She watches them depart, satisfied that her ties to them remain strong, her household's reputation intact. By midday, the courtyard is once again a place of preparation. A meal is laid out, simpler than the feast of the previous day, but no less meaningful. Stews of potatoes and maize, roasted meats, fresh herbs, all served with vessels of chicha. Her household gathers to eat together, laughter and conversation mingling with the clatter of vessels. The noblewoman sits at the center, her presence dignified, yet warm, reminding all that even in the act of eating, reciprocity must be honored, first to the earth with offerings, then to each other with generosity. The meal strengthens them for the labors ahead, for as afternoon approaches, artisans will resume their tasks, messengers will continue to arrive, and the noblewoman herself must prepare for yet another round of ritual obligations. Yet even as she contemplates what lies ahead, she feels within her the steady rhythm of continuity. Today is not yesterday, and tomorrow will bring its own demands. But beneath these shifting details lies the unbroken cycle that defines her existence. The new day is in motion, its hours unfolding like threads across a loom. The noblewoman stands at the center of this weaving, not as a solitary figure, but as part of a fabric larger than herself, woven of kinship, obligation, devotion, and memory. The sun continues its climb, the city hums with life, and the empire endures, sustained by countless acts of duty like hers. What began at dawn now stretches forward, promising another full cycle of devotion, labor, and generosity. For her, as for all within Tawantinsuyu, the morning has not merely begun, has renewed the cosmos once more. The sun has now reached its firm place in the sky, its golden rays streaming across the terraces, temples, and plazas of Cuzco, striking stone walls with a brilliance that makes them shimmer as if alive. Within this radiance, the noblewoman's morning routine is not an isolated habit, but part of something larger, something woven into the pulse of the empire itself. Her every gesture was a pouring chicha upon the earth. Overseeing the weaving of cloth, or receiving messengers, is mirrored in countless other households, across the city and far beyond, the valleys and highlands, deserts and coasts. The life of one noblewoman is but a thread, yet together these threads form the fabric of Tawantinsuyu. She knows this deeply, though she may not speak of it in abstract terms. Her awareness comes from lived experience. From the way decrees pass from Cuzco outward through messengers, from the way goods flow into storehouses and then back out in ritual or redistribution, from the way her household, though grand, depends upon the labor of others and in turn provides for them. Reciprocity is not an ideal spoken in lofty phrases, but a daily practice embodied in the movement of maize, coca, cloth, and prayer. To tend her household with precision and reverence is to contribute to the empire's stability. Just as failing in her duties would ripple outward, disturbing the delicate balance, when she oversees the weaving of textiles, she is conscious that these are not simply garments. Some will clothe her family, some will serve as offerings in rituals, some will be gifted to officials, and some may even be demanded by the state as part of their meta obligations. Each textile represents hours of labor and artistry, but beyond that, each one is a token of belonging, proof that her household participates in the sacred exchange that binds communities together. Without these textiles, alliances weaken. Without the offerings, rituals lose force. Without reciprocity, the empire's foundations falter. Similarly, the maize stored in her granaries is more than food. It is energy transformed by the sun, nurtured by the earth, is carried by water, harvested by hands, and preserved through skill. When she chooses to distribute maize at feasts, she demonstrates not only generosity, but cosmic alignment, showing that her household honors the flow of abundance. When maize is poured upon the ground in libation, it becomes the voice of gratitude to Pachamama. acknowledging that what has been taken must also be returned. To hoard May selfishly would not only shame her household, but also disrupt the order that sustains fertility itself. Her children, watching her choices, absorb these truths gradually. They see that wealth is not static, but dynamic, a current that must flow outward if it is to return. They learn that honor rests not in accumulation, but in generosity. That status is measured not by how much one possesses, but by how much one circulates. In this way, her mourning lessons are not simply for her household, but for the future of her lineage, ensuring that the rhythm continues after her own life has ended. Messages from imperial officials reinforce this pattern, reminding her that her household is part of a network that stretches across mountains, deserts, and forests. When she sends goods to officials passing through, she participates in a ritual of acknowledgement, recognizing that her household does not stand alone, but is sustained by the larger machinery of the state. In return, the empire provides her with security, prestige, and the means to fulfill her obligations. The relationship is reciprocal, never one-sided, for in Inca thought, imbalance is dangerous, inviting collapse. The noblewoman's mourning also reflects the empire's attention to order and symmetry. Just as her altar must be arranged with care with May's chicha and textiles placed in precise balance, so too must the empire itself be. Arranged roads radiating outward from Cuzco like the threads of illumined storehouses, stocked in measured proportions. Labor organized according to age, gender, and ability. When she insists upon symmetry in offerings, she mirrors the state's insistence on organization in its administration. Both gestures arise from the same principle, that harmony requires structure, that disorder invites chaos. Her gatherings with other noblewomen reveal another layer of the empire's structure. They do not simply chat idly. Their words reinforce networks of kinship and alliance that keep households bound together in loyalty and cooperation. Just as provinces are tied to Cusco through the flow of tribute and ritual, so too are noble households tied to one another through visits, exchanges, and shared meals. The empire lives not only in the commands of emperors and officials, but also in the cups of chicha, passed between women and the gifts of coca leaves exchanged with a smile and the careful listening to one another's concerns. To neglect these bonds would weaken the web that holds the empire together. The noblewoman reflects on these truths as she moves through her routine, though her actions may appear simple, pouring a libation, correcting a weaving pattern, receiving a messenger, they are saturated with meaning. Each act reverberates outward, sustaining not only her household but the empire itself. She is aware that her role as a noblewoman places her at the intersection of personal devotion and public responsibility. Her body is not only her own. Her labor is not only for herself. Her prayers are not whispered in isolation, but join the chorus that rises from countless households, reaching gods and ancestors alike. The sun now shines fully upon the city, illuminating the great plaza where officials gather. Temples rise, and people move purposefully through their tasks. From her vantage, the noblewoman imagines the countless others who at this very moment perform parallel acts. Women in distant valleys pouring libations to Pachamama, men on terrace slopes, offering coca before planting priests in temples, lifting their arms to Inti. She feels herself part of this vast rhythm, a single note in a symphony of devotion. Her household is but one among thousands, yet without it, the harmony would be incomplete. And so her morning routine, while deeply personal, is also profoundly collective. It reflects the ideology that sustains Tawantinsuyu, that no act exists in isolation, that every gesture must be woven into the whole, that reciprocity is the thread that binds humans, gods, and cosmos together. In this, the noblewoman's life embodies the principles of her empire. By tending her household with care, she participates in the weaving of a world. The day stretches ahead of her, full of tasks and obligations. But already she has reaffirmed her place in the order of things. The sun has risen, the offerings have been made, the bonds of kinship have been renewed, the storerooms have been inspected. The empire breathes through her actions, just as she breathes through its rhythms. The cycle continues, unbroken, sustained by devotion and duty. And as she looks once more toward the mountains, standing eternal against the sky, she feels the truth of what her life embodies, that she is a vessel of continuity, carrying the empire's principles into each new dawn. The morning has ripened into late morning, the sun standing high enough that its warmth softens the chill still clinging to the stone streets. Cuzco hums with movement, its roads alive with footsteps, the sound of traders calling out their wares, and the steady cadence of imperial messengers passing swiftly on their way. For the noblewoman, the household is never the whole of her sphere. Her presence is also demanded in the plazas, where visibility and participation are as crucial as the private rituals of her courtyard. She prepares carefully for such an appearance, donning garments more elaborate than those she wears at home, but still distinct from the finery reserved for grand festivals. A mantle of deep crimson, edged with black and gold patterns, falls across her shoulders, its folds heavy but dignified. Attendants fasten it with a tupu pin crafted in the shape of a sunburst, the metal gleaming when it catches the light. Her hair is coiled into intricate braids, secured with ornaments that signal her rank without ostentation. To dress this way is not a matter of vanity, but of responsibility. Her clothing announces her lineage, her status, and her devotion to imperial ideals. When she steps into the streets, her attendants move with her in practiced order. To carry small bundles of offerings, one holds a vessel of chicha, and others ensure that the way is clear. Yet the people of Cuzco do not shrink from her presence. Instead, they acknowledge it with respect, nodding as she passes, sometimes offering coca leaves in greeting. She returns their gestures with calm grace, for in this city, nobility is not a fortress that separates but a bridge that binds. Her authority is rooted in reciprocity, and so her very movements through the streets are part of the rhythm that sustains it. The plaza of Cuzco opens before her, vast and radiant under the noonday sun. Here the empire gathers in miniature. Officials cluster in groups conferring over decrees. Artisans display their goods for trade or tribute. Pilgrims from distant provinces wander with wide eyes, awed by the magnificence of the city. At the plaza's heart, the temples and palaces rise in solemn grandeur, their stonework so precise that it seems less built than grown. Every block fits with such care that no blade of grass can slip between them, a testament to the empire's devotion to order. The noblewoman moves to a designated space near the steps of a temple, where women of her rank gather at this hour to witness and participate in civic rituals. Today, a ceremony honoring the moon is being prepared. For the lunar cycle is as vital as the sun's path, governing, planting, fertility, and the rhythm of festivals. She greets her peers with embraces and words of mutual respect, noting their garments, their attendants, their offerings. Each noblewoman is a thread of the empire, and here they weave themselves into a visible pattern, one that asserts the presence and power of the aristocracy in maintaining balance. Priests emerge from the temple, their garments white and gold, their heads crowned with feathers. The people fall into reverent silence. Asha! A chant begins, low at first, but rising. A steady hum that seems to vibrate through the plaza stones. And the noblewoman joins the chant, her voice blending with hundreds of others, her breath one note in a collective hymn. The ceremony unfolds with offerings of chicha, textiles, and maize placed upon altars, with prayers lifted to the moon as mother, protector, and mirror of the sun. She raises her arms when the priests call for blessing, her face turned toward the silvered sky where the moon lingers faintly, still visible though day has claimed dominion. In that pale curve, she sees not just a celestial body but a companion to the sun, a balance of masculine and feminine, a rhythm of light and shadow. Her prayers are whispered for fertility of the fields, for the health of her children, for the endurance of the empire's harmony. She knows that her words are carried upward, joining those of her peers, woven into a chorus that the gods cannot ignore. When the ritual concludes, the priests offer blessings in return, sprinkling water from sacred vessels across the gathered nobles. Droplets strike her mantle, glistening briefly before vanishing into the weave of the cloth. She accepts them silently, feeling the coolness as a confirmation that the bonds between human and divine remain intact. Around her, the plaza erupts in renewed activity. Traders resume their calls. Musicians strike up flutes and drums. Children dart between clusters of adults. Yet she lingers a moment, savoring the transition from solemnity to movement, the way ceremony breathes into daily life without boundary. Afterward, she joins a smaller procession toward the palace of a higher-ranking noble, where discussion of resources and obligations continues. Here, she listens as others speak of harvest yields, of road maintenance, of festivals to come. Her contributions are measured and thoughtful, offered not to dominate, but to maintain balance. She pledges maize for an upcoming feast, volunteers textiles for an imperial messenger's provision, and reminds her peers of the importance of unity. Her words carry weight, for she speaks not only for herself, but for her household, her kin, and the traditions she embodies. By the time she returns to her own home, the sun has passed its zenith, shadows beginning to stretch across the city. Her household awaits her, attendants standing ready to relieve her of mantle and ornaments, children eager to share their own small tasks completed in her absence. She listens patiently, acknowledging their efforts, weaving her personal presence back into the fabric of the home. Yet even here, the echoes of the plaza remain, the memory of chants and blessings resonating in her mind. In this way, the noblewoman's mourning has expanded outward from private ritual in the courtyard to public ritual in the plaza. From the intimacy of her household to the grandeur of the empire, her life moves between these spheres without contradiction, for each reflects and sustains the other. The libation poured at dawn in her courtyard finds its echo in the offerings laid upon temple altars. The symmetry of her household mirrors the symmetry of the plaza. The generosity she teaches her children resonates in the gifts exchanged with peers. The empire thrives because these connections hold firm, because the rhythms of household and state interlace seamlessly. She understands that her role is not to choose between them, but to inhabit both fully, to weave them together through her presence and her devotion. For in Tawantinsuyu, the personal is always political, the domestic always sacred, the routine always cosmic. The sun's climb through the sky reflects her own climb through duties. The plaza mirrors her courtyard, and the gods gaze down upon both with equal attention. And so, as the day continues, the noblewoman stands at the heart of this great weaving. Her every act a strand that binds her household to her city to the empire, and the empire to the cosmos. In her morning routine, repeated yet always new, she enacts the continuity that makes Tawantinsuyu endure.